So we're going to try to go through the whole process. And so I'm going to create a new virtual machine. I'm going to click Next on Custom. Hardware compatibility, VMware Workstation 12. I'll install the operating system later. I'm going to choose Microsoft Windows, but I'm going to choose Windows Server 2012. Then I'm going to click Next. I'm going to call this one DC1. I'm going to browse on my hard drive, on my portable hard drive, and I'm going to, first of all, under my portable hard drive, make a new folder called Final Exam. I'm going to try to keep all these files together. So I'm going to make it Final Exam, and then underneath Final Exam, I'm going to make my new folder called DC1 for Domain Controller 1. When I click OK, I click Next. BIOS is fine. 1 processor is fine. 2 gig is all that I need. I know I'm going to do virtualization later on though, so I'm going to bump it up to 4. I know I'm going to put Hyper-V on here. Then I click Next. Use NAT for network address, translation network type. Click Next. LSI, logic, IO controller, whatever. SCSI recommended. Create a new virtual disk. Just for this exam, I'm going to put this as a single file as opposed to multiple files. Do not worry, they're going to function the same. So it doesn't make any difference. For whatever reason, I'm choosing a single file tonight. I'm going to click Next, and then Finish. This creates the hardware for my server. I'm going to need to install the operating system now by ejecting the CD tray and clicking on it and then looking for my ISO image. Make sure I'm choosing the right one. ISO 2012 R2. So I'm going to choose Server 2012 R2. Click Open for my, basically taking my CD, putting it in the drive, and then powering on the virtual machine. For the Windows setup, I'm just going to click Next for my location and language. I'm going to click Install. And I'm going to choose for my first domain controller on the standard edition with GUI. I'm going to click Next. I'm going to quickly read the license agreement, and then I'm going to accept the license terms and then click Next. I'm going to choose the custom option to install Windows only on my 60 gigabyte hard drive, and then I'm going to let Windows do its install. After it's done installing, it's going to come up and ask for our new password for our administrator. I'm going to use our special password, capital PA $W0RD. And that's my server so far. I'm going to go ahead and log in with the Control-Alt-Insert, log in with password. And I need to do a couple initial configuration type things. With the screen resolution, you have to be careful. You have to scroll on down to make sure you get the bottom menu. Yes, I do want to allow the network to find devices on my network, so I click Yes. Server Manager automatically launches. When it does, I want to click on Configure this local server. And the things I want to change are the computer name, its IP address, and its time zone. So I'm going to change its computer name first by clicking on the computer name, click on our change and our rename, and I'm going to name it DC1. That's not where you change it. Change it to DC1. There we go. DC1, not an exclamation point. They want me to restart. I know that. I'm going to click Close, and I'm going to restart later, though. I'm not going to restart now. I'm going to restart later. I'm going to click on the IP addressing then. IP address assigned is by DHCP. I want to change that. I'm going to right-click on Ethernet and click on Properties. Go to IP version 4, click on Properties, and I want to give it the static address. The IP addresses are listed on the exam. Make sure you set the numlock on and hit 192.168.118.21 for the exam. 255 is the default gateway. Subnet mask, which is correct. And the default gateway is that virtual router, which is 192.168.118.2. We do have a DNS server also built into that router, so it's going to be 192.168.118.2, so it can find its way out to the internet. I click OK and then close, and that does my IP address setting, and this will refresh, or I can refresh up on the top. The last thing I want to change is on the right hand side, time zone. By default it is UTC-8, which is Pacific time, which is Redmond, Washington. We are not in Redmond, Washington. We are in Central Time. So I go ahead and click US Central Time and click OK and OK. That's the basic configuration of the server. What I need to do now is install VMware tools. To do that, I go up to the menu on top, go up to VM, and I can do install VMware tools. I go ahead and click install, and a little blue box should show up in the corner. If I miss it, I'm able to still go to the file manager. So I'm going to click it though. I can go to the file manager and choose my D drive and run setup64. All that by clicking on VMware tools install, all it does is mount a virtual CD in your D drive. I click Next on the VMware Tools setup screen. I keep typical and click Next again, and I click Install. And now it gives me a much better screen resolution, among other things. I go ahead and click Finish. It then wants me to restart. I do want to restart, so it does change the computer name and finish the VMware Tools install. I go ahead and log back in, Control-Alt-Insert, our special password. And on my base server, all configured. The next part about DC1 or Domain Controller 1 is that it should be a domain controller on a new gopa.com domain. So to do that, I'm going to go to Add Roles and Features on my server and bring that up a little bit. And I'll click Next. And it's a role-based or feature-based installation, which is just Next. I only have one server to choose from, so it makes it kind of easy. So I'm going to install it on DC1. And I'm going to choose Active Directory Domain Services. When I choose that, it's going to want me to install additional features to go along with that. I go ahead and click that. It asks me if I want to install any other roles. I do not, so I click Next. It asks if I want to install any additional features. I do not, so I click Next again. And then I click Next. I'm going to click on it to choose. I'm going to check the checkbox that says restart the destination server automatically if required. It gives me a warning saying, are you sure you want to do it automatically? Yes, I do. And then I click install. Once it's complete, it's going to tell you that the configuration is required, but the installation succeeded. This is actually the easy part. The little bit more time-consuming and more complicated part is promoting this server to a domain controller. You can click it right here on this screen, or if you close, you can go back to the notification area. I'm going to click here on Promote this server to a domain controller. When I do, it's going to ask me if I want to put in an existing domain or create a new forest, of which I want to do in this case. And I'll call my domain gopa.com. I go ahead and click next. It's going to go out and look for a duplicate name, and this can take quite a while. Once it's done checking, I'm able to enter a password under the DSRM or Directory Services Restore mode password. I'm going to enter my special password again. And those definitely do not match. I go ahead and click Next under DNS. And I wait for it to find a NetBIOS name. When that comes up, I'm able to click Next. I'm going to leave the default for all the database and log file folders. Just a review of your selection. I'll go ahead and click Next. It's going to do a prereq check. Once it checks the prereq, if there's no errors, only warnings, then you're able to click Install. And then you wait. So after it installs, the domain controller becomes the domain controller. It's going to reboot, and I can go ahead and log in. Control-Insert. If I click on Configure this local server, I should see that I'm part of the gopa.com domain, and I am. So that should be what I'm looking for the very first part for the server. The next server I want to install is going to be a server core, and it's going to be DC2. So I'm going to go to Home, and I'm going to create a new virtual machine. And I click Next on Custom Workstation 12 Compatibility, install the operating system later, Server 2012 operating system, and I'm going to call this DC2. I'm going to put this in the same location, so it's going to be out on my drive underneath the final exam folder and a new folder called DC2 for Domain Controller 2. Go ahead and click OK, and I click Next. I'll leave it as BIOS, 1 processor, 2 gigs of RAM, network address translation network, I/O controller, SCSI, new hard drive, 60 gig as a single file, clicking Next for the name, and then click Finish for my hardware configuration. I want to insert the CD into my CD-ROM drive, so I'm going to click on the CD DVD, click on Use ISO image. I'm going to browse, and I'm going to choose the Windows Server 2012 R2 ISO image, and then click OK. I'm going to power on the virtual machine.
DC2 is core.
For the language and locality, I just choose Next, and then I choose Install Windows Server 2012. It's going to ask me for the version, and it defaults to Standard Edition Server Core, and that is what we're going to choose for our server core, for our DC2, the server core. So I go ahead and click Next. I reread the license agreement, and I click I accept the license terms, and I click Next. I'm going to use the custom option to install Windows on my 60 gig hard drive, and I'm going to let Windows do its install. After it reboots, after it installs, it's going to reboot. When it reboots, it's going to come up and ask you to change the administrator's password. Go ahead and click OK. After you do that, type in your password, your special password twice, capital PA, $W0RD. That's going to change the password. Your password's been changed. Go ahead and click OK. And it's going to log in. It leaves you with just a command prompt. We still need to change the IP address, the computer name, and time zone. Almost forgot one. sconfig is the tool that we're going to use. There's multiple ways you can do this. Sconfig is probably the easiest. So using sconfig will bring you up this menu system. Option number 2, going down the list, is computer name. So I hit number 2, I hit enter, the new computer name, I'm going to make DC2 and hit enter. It's going to say, do you want to restart now? No, I do not want to restart now. It's going to take me back to the configuration window. I'm then going to go down to number 8 for network settings. Hit number 8. It asks me which network adapter do you want to work with. I only have one listed. You do have to look at that index number. Most likely it will be 10, but does not have to be 10. So make sure you copy that index number. In my case, it is 10. So I hit enter. There's two things I need to do on here. One is set the network adapter address, and then also set the DNS. So I hit number 1 to set the network adapter address. And I do not type the IP address in here. Lots of people do. This is where you choose dynamic or DHCP. I'm sorry, DHCP or static. Hit S for static. Then you're capable of entering the IP address. Make sure numlock is on and type in the IP address that's on the exam, which is 192.168.118.22. When you hit enter, the default subnet mask is a 255.255.255.0 address, which is correct. So hit enter. And the gateway, default gateway, is how you get off this network, which is 192.168.118.2. And go ahead and hit enter. The next thing we need to do is change the DNS server. The DNS server originally, for the first server, points to the router to do a DNS forwarding out to other DNS servers. This DNS server, in fact, is DC1. So it's going to be 192.168.118.21 is going to be for DC1. It's going to know what gopa.com is for later on when you try to join it. So go ahead and enter. It says that they've been changed, so go ahead and click OK. Alternate, none, so just hit enter. And we have our IP configuration all done. I can return to the main menu by hitting number 4. The next thing I need to change is the date and time. I hit number 9 for date and time. It brings up the little applet, the GUI applet, so I don't have to remember all those time zone commands. I can just click on the big time zone, change time zone button. Do the drop down for Central Time, go ahead and click OK, and then click OK again. I have now configured the things I need to configure in sconfig, so I'm going to hit number 15 to exit back to the command line. What I do need to do still is install VMware Tools. To do that, I go up to VM, and I go to Install VMware Tools, and it's not going to do anything. There's nothing graphical about this. So it does still mount a virtual CD though on the D drive. So you just have to change directories to the D drive. So I hit D colon to go to the D drive. If I do a dir, which is listing the directory to see what files are there, you'll see that there's a setup64 file. I just type setup64 and hit enter. And now it does give me the graphical install for VMware Tools. It does pop up in the background, so you have to click on it to bring it to the foreground. I do want to click Next to install VMware Tools. I'll again choose Typical. and then click install. It does change the screen resolution, so your command prompt box looks so much nicer. You go ahead and click finish when you're done, and you click yes to restart your computer. You'll get this error, just ignore it and go ahead and click OK. It does come back up, it allows me to log back in. I'm doing Control-Alt-Insert to log back in. I will get this logon error, just ignore it. So that's the basic configuration for your domain controller 2. We still need to make it a domain controller, however. We've just made it as a standalone server. And there's a couple different ways of doing this. The way that I'm going to do this, to demonstrate this, is to have DC2 join the domain, which is a pretty easy task using sconfig, and then using DC1 to remotely install Active Directory and then make DC2 a domain controller. So the first thing I'm going to do is use sconfig to join the domain. So to join the domain, I hit number 1 to join the domain, and it has D. I type in D to join a domain. The domain name is gopa.com. It's going to ask me for a username and password to log in. It's going to be gopa/administrator. Then ask me for a password. The password will not show up as you type. No stars, no dashes, no nothing. So as you type, just make sure you type correctly and then hit enter. It's going to want you to restart your computer. I'm sorry, back up. Do you want to change the computer name? No, I don't. I already changed it to what I want it. So I'm going to keep it DC2. So no. And it says you must restart your computer. Now I click yes. I still have not made this a domain controller, but I have joined the domain, which makes it easier to remotely administer it. There are ways of adding Active Directory on here from the command prompt or from PowerShell. I'm going to use a graphical user interface though. It doesn't have it on this side, but it does have it on the domain controller 1. If I click over on all servers, it's not going to be listed there until I add it. So I'm going to add it by right-clicking on all servers and choose all add servers. Click on the find now button. It's going to show all my servers, and I want to add DC2 to my list. So I click on DC2, click the little arrow to the right, and then click OK. I'm going to let it do its connection stuff. And once it's online, I can install roles and features. I could actually go back to the dashboard at this point. You can do it either from that screen or from the dashboard. But I'm going to add roles and features. And it's role-based. So I click Next. And now it has asked me which server I want to put a role on. I want to put a role on Domain Controller 2 or DC2. I go ahead and click Next. And it's going to ask which role I want to add. I want to add Active Directory Domain Services. It's the same thing I added on DC1. It wants to add these additional features. I click Add. I don't want to add any more roles. I don't want to add any other features, so I click Next. I click Next. I'm going to say restart the server if it needs to, and then I go ahead and click Install. And it's installing Active Directory Domain Services on DC2. Just like in DC1, when it's done installing Active Directory, it still is not a domain controller yet. It just has the underlying software for it. So I still need to promote this server as a domain controller. So I can click here or click on the notification area up on top. After I close this, I'm going to click on promote this server to a domain controller. And again, by this server, it's referring to DC2. So I'm going to click promote this server to a domain controller. And when I do, it's going to ask me if I want to put it into an existing tree, an existing forest, or a new forest. I want to go into an existing domain. And it comes up by default to Gopa. I still need to click Select though. and I still need to type in the administrator password combination to say that I can join the forest. I need to click gopa.com again and then click OK. It's kind of a tedious section. I'm not sure why that's written that way, but that's what you need to do. And then you can go ahead and click Next. Because it's an existing forest, it's not going to ask you any of those questions about what do you want to call it, what's the NetBIOS name, and all that kind of stuff. I still have to have, being a domain controller, still have its own password for restore mode. So we're going to use our fancy password to enter in there and go ahead and click Next. DNS is already taken care of, so just click Next. It needs to replicate the information. Domain controllers replicate information back and forth or complete copies. Where should I get it from? You could list specifically where to get it from. I only have one other one, so it doesn't really matter what you choose. Go ahead and choose Next. I'm going to choose all the defaults for my folders. I click Next. This is to review your information. Everything looks good. I click Next. It's going to do a prereq check, and then I click Install. It tells me that the server was successfully configured as a domain controller, so I can go ahead and click Close. I'm going to click Close again for this install part. If I happen to switch over to DC2, you should see that it's going to restart. And you don't care, it's just in the background, it does its own thing. There's nothing that you need to do with it. So now I have a domain controller 1 and a domain controller 2. They will be completely synchronized. If one goes down, people can still log in onto the other one, so it gives you some load balancing and some backups. And so I have two domain controllers. The next task I'm going to do is install Hyper-V IIS as a virtual machine on Hyper-V on domain controller 1. So before I can do that, I need to make a couple changes on domain controller 1 on the hardware side of things. So I need to bring it down. I'm going to right click on the little home button, go to shutdown and sign out, click shutdown. Click continue of why. It's an unplanned reason. It really was planned, I guess. And when the server is down, I want to click on edit the virtual machine settings. This is so that I can install Hyper-V role on the server. Well, in order to do that, I need to virtualize the processor or allow the processor to do virtualization. So under the hardware section, I click on processors and I check both the checkboxes that talk about virtualize. I'm going to virtualize the Intel or AMD, and I'm going to virtualize the CPU performance counters. The second thing I need, this is what you'd normally have to do in BIOS, is to enable virtualization. The second thing is a VMware thing, is under options. We don't want it to show Windows Server 2012. We really have to tell it that it's going to be a Hyper-V server. So I click Hyper-V, and then I click OK. I then power on this virtual machine again. It's going to allow me to log in, Control-Alt-Insert, use my password to log in, and Server Manager should start up. If I configured everything correctly, I should be able to go to Add Roles and Features. Go ahead and click Next. It's a role-based or feature-based installation. I click Next again. I'm going to install Hyper-V on DC1, on Domain Controller 1. I go ahead and click Next, and I'm going to choose Hyper-V. It's going to want to add these additional features. I click OK. I don't want to add any other roles. I don't want to add any other features. I click Next, and I click Next again. It's going to need a network connection. It's still a virtual, it's a virtual environment. It needs to be able to connect with the rest of the network. So I'm going to choose my Ethernet connection for it to be able to use to get out. I go ahead and click next. And then I don't care about that. So I'm going to click next. Leave all the defaults here. Kind of note them that the virtual hard disks are found under C users public documents Hyper-V, where the Hyper-V virtual machines themselves are under program data, Microsoft and Windows, and then Hyper-V. But I'm going to leave all the defaults. I'm still going to say restart the computer, restart this destination server if required. It's just warning you, are you sure? Yes, I am. And then I click install. It takes a while to install. It reboots a couple times and finally comes back in so you can log in. So I'm going to do Control-Alt-Insert to log in. Log in with my password. And I have Hyper-V role installed on here. Because Hyper-V role is installed on here, I'm now capable of installing a virtual machine on this server. And that's what I'm going to do next after it finishes its install. Now it's succeeded. Now I can click close. I'm going to minimize Server Manager for right now. What I need to do though first is get an image, ISO image onto the server so that I can use it to install the virtual machine. This is sort of a VMware thing, so I'm going to go to my browser. I'm going to use my desktop browser file manager, not the virtual machines. Find my ISO image of Windows Server 2012 R2. You can copy it to a folder if you want. I'm just going to dump it on the desktop. And I'm going to let it copy over there. So that's a VMware thing that you're able to drag and drop from your host to your guest, or from your desktop computer to your virtual machine. I'll just move this out of the way. More likely than not, if this was real, you would put that server, that ISO file, on a shared storage space. But we don't have that yet. After it's done copying, I can go back to Server Manager. And once I'm in Server Manager, I can run Hyper-V Manager. I go ahead and click Hyper-V Manager. And I see that I have a domain controller 1 as a Hyper-V server. If I right-click on a DC1, I can right-click and choose New Virtual Machine. There's other ways of doing it. There's all kinds of places you can do it. But I'm going to create a new virtual machine. I go ahead and click Next. And what's the name of my virtual machine? It's going to be called IIS. I'm going to leave all the defaults for the locations of the files. And I go ahead and click Next. I'm going to leave it as a Gen 1, even though I could get away with Gen 2. I'm just going to leave it Gen 1. I click Next. The startup memory, I'm going to put it as 2 gigs, so 2048 megabytes. And I'm not going to use dynamic memory. All I want you to do is create a virtual machine. We're not going to get into all the technical details of it. Go ahead and click Next. It's going to ask me for a network connection. Make sure you drop down and choose your network card so that you can actually connect with the other devices. I go ahead and click Next. It's going to create a new hard disk, which is fine, in the default location. And I'm going to click Next. And it says I can install the operating system later, or I can install the operating system from a bootable CD. I'm going to choose that option, and then I'm going to choose an image file, browse to my desktop, and on my desktop I'll have my ISO image of Windows Server 2012 R2. And I go ahead and click Open, and then Next. Once this looks right, go ahead and click Finish. And it creates the machine. It is not turned on yet, and is not installed. It's just basically the hardware is configured. So to start it, I click on IIS, and I can click the Start button down here, or right click and say Start, and I'm going to start the machine. It's going to give you a little icon or a little graphic on the corner down here, but to truly connect to it, I can double click on it or right click on it and say connect, or connect down here. I'm just going to double click on it, and it's going to open up a window for the virtual machine. I'm going to maximize it as best as I can on the screen. Go to full screen mode, and this probably looks pretty familiar. We're going to choose the language and time for English, and then just click next. I'm going to install the server. For IIS, I'm also going to do a server core install. So I click next. I read the license agreement because it could have changed, and I accept the license terms, and I click next. I choose the custom option to install Windows on my 127 gigabyte hard drive, and it's going to go ahead and do the install. So after the installation of your base operating system, it's going to come back up. It's going to say that your user's password must be changed. Go ahead and click OK. We're going to enter our special password for the administrator password. Password's been changed. Click OK. It's going to bring me to the command prompt. I need to configure this machine as well. So I'm going to use sconfig to do some standard configuration. One of it's going to be the computer name. So I'm going to hit number 2 for the computer name. And I'm going to call the computer name IIS. I'm not going to restart right now. I'll restart later. I also want to change the network settings, so I hit number 8 for network settings. I'm using adapter number 10. I'm going to set this network adapter's IP address by typing number 1, making sure you hit S for static, and then typing the IP address. Make sure you turn numlock on. It's 192.168.118.23. The default mask, subnet mask, is perfectly fine, 255.255.255.0, and the default gateway should be 192.168.118.2 for the default gateway. I'm also going to set the DNS. The DNS should point back to my domain controller 1. So I'm going to type in 192.168.118.21, and I hit enter. There is not a second one, so I'm going to hit enter. I'm done with the IP configuration, so I hit number 4. I move on to date and time for number 9. And I click on the change time zone. I drop down from Pacific time and move to Central time. Click OK. Click OK. I'm done with those configuration. Oh, hang on. Wrong button. 15, not 14, to exit the main menu. I do not need to install VMware tools. This is not a VMware virtual machine. This is a Hyper-V virtual machine. It does not need extra tools installed. So I'm done at this point. What I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to join the domain. I'm just trying to think. I already changed the computer name, but I'll just go number 1. Oops, let's go back to the menu. sconfig. So hit number 1 for the domain. I want to join the domain called D for domain, name of domain to join. gopa.com. What's the name of the authorized user? It's going to be gopa/administrator. Enter. Type in the unseen password. And in the background, it should say it's wrong. Let's try that again. The domain should be gopa.com. Gopa administrator. And you want to change the computer name. I already did. I'm not sure if I should restart it or not, so I'm going to click yes again. And the new name is going to be IIS. It's the same thing I called it when I went through it the first time. Again, it wants to authorize the user. So Gopa administrator, and then password. And you must restart. So yes, I want to restart. As I see it trying to boot to CD or DVD, it reminds me, good practice, which I've been neglecting, is to remove your DVDs from your virtual machines when you're done installing. It actually adds a lot of lag to it because it's looking out there ever so often, and as we get into other classes, it can actually cause some issues if you forget to do that. So after this, I'll go back through and remove the DVD drive from all of my servers. I can hit Control-Alt-End to log into a Hyper-V virtual machine. And you can see that I am logging into a local machine here. I want to log into the domain. So I click on the back, other user, and I can do Gopa /administrator, and then use password, and I should be able to log in. Okay. There's really nothing I need to do at this point. We'll come back and install IIS itself as a role later on. So I'm going to close this window. Closing this window does not close the virtual machine. It just closes the window to the virtual machine. The virtual machine is still running. I'm going to edit this virtual machine here. And go to Settings, right-click and click on Settings. When I choose my CD-ROM DVD drive, it's still pointing to that evaluation. And I click None on here and click Apply. So I'm taking off the CD drive from this virtual machine. Going one step up, this is my DC1. I'm going to go to the virtual machine for DC1 and go to Settings. And I'm going to remove, I'm going to say use a physical drive, and then I'm going to disconnect on power on and that it's connected now. So I'm making it use a physical drive if and when it's connected, but it's not going to be connected now or when I turn it back on. I'm going to switch over to DC2 and do the exact same thing. Go to VM, Settings, CD DVD drive, use a physical drive and turn it off now and in the future. Do not connect it, don't turn it off, but still be there, just not connected to anything. That should make it a little bit more efficient. So I should have those 3 servers created, which is the first part of the exam. The next part is the clients. So I need to install a Windows 8 client. So I'm going to create a new virtual machine. I'm going to do this on a physical drive though, because I have problems installing 8.1 still on a solid state drive. So this is going to be a little bit slower. I'm still choosing VMware Workstation 12 compatibility. I'm going to install the operating system later, and my operating system is going to be x64. 64-bit. I'm naming this virtual machine Win-8, and I'm going to put it on a different drive, but underneath still a folder called Final Exam. Make the folder called Win8-1. So I'm installing a virtual machine in a Win8 Win folder. I'm still using BIOS, 1 processor, 2 gigs of RAM, NATed network, recommended SCSI controller, create a virtual disk, 1 file, and I click Next and Finish. I then click on the CD DVD drive. I want to use the image file of Win8-1 Enterprise, and I click Open, and then I click OK, and then I power on the virtual machine. For the language and time and currency, I'm going to choose Next on English. I'm going to click Install Now. I'm going to read the license agreement and click I accept the license terms and click Next. I'm going to choose the custom option to install Windows on my 60 gig hard drive, and I'm going to let it do its install. After Windows 8 is finished installing, it's going to reboot and come up to giving it a PC name. We're going to want to call this Win8-1. I go ahead and hit Next. It's going to want to use Express Settings, automatically find devices, automatically install Windows updates. I do not want to do that, so I'm going to click Customize. So I'm going to click Customize for these settings. Yes, it is a home or work network. I do not want to automatically install important or recommended updates. Not during the exam. It'd probably be a good idea sometime in the future, but I do not want this to be downloading in the background. So make sure you choose Do Not Set Up Windows Update. These items are all fine though, as far as how they do get updates, when they get them. So go ahead and click Next. Check online for solutions. These are fine. The settings that are currently here. The next one was share information and other with Microsoft and others. Turn these all off. We're just evaluating this. It's just a short-term thing. We don't need to be sending extra data over the network. Go ahead and click Next. And now it's going to set up your account. It's going to want you to sign in with your Microsoft account. Don't, even if you have one. You're going to go ahead and create a new account. It's going to want you to create a new Microsoft account. Again, you don't want to do that, so you want to sign in without a Microsoft account. We want to create a local account. The local account we want to create is called Student, with our special password as the password. And you can even give yourself a hint by typing in special password. Go ahead and click Finish. And it's going to finalize your settings. When it's done installing, there's a couple things we need to do. One thing is we need to install VMware Workstation or VMware Tools. So I'm going to click up on the top under Workstation VM, install VMware Tools, and then go ahead and click Install. It's going to be the little blue box just like it was on Server 2012. I go ahead and click on the blue box. If I do miss it, I can still go through File Manager and go to my D drive. Click Run Setup 64. Say yes, I want to install it. I go ahead and click Next for the install wizard. I want to choose a typical install, so I click Next and I click Install.
Still the Win8 client, right?
Mm-hmm. When it's done, go ahead and click Finish. It wants you to restart. Say no. We will be restarting later on. Just like on other computers, like we would do with computer name, IP addressing, and time zone, we want to do the same things here. We don't have to change the computer name. We set that up initially, but we could take a look at the IP address. So I'm going to right click on the network connection icon, open Network and Sharing Center. I'm going to choose the Ethernet connection. I'm going to click on the Properties button. And then I'm going to scroll on down to TCP/IP version 4 and then click Properties. I will keep the IP address to obtain it automatically. I don't need to have a static address on a client. However, my DNS does need to be configured in order to join the domain. This client is going to join the domain later on, so it needs to be able to find it. So it needs to point to the proper DNS, which will be 192.168.118.21. I go ahead and click OK. And then I click Close for that. And close the network settings again. I want to right-click on the time itself. And then I want to adjust the date and time. And I want to change the time zone just like we would on a server. So I click Change the Time Zone from Pacific Time to Central Time, and I go ahead and click OK. So the computer name should be set, the IP address should be set, the time zone should be set. I want to make sure that I do disconnect my CD drive though. So I go to VM Settings, choose my CD DVD drive, click on Use Physical Drive, and then uncheck Connected Power On and uncheck Connected. Go and click OK. Everything should be set at this point as VMware Tools installed. So I'm going to close this. But what I'm going to do now is join the domain. I'm going to have this join the GOPA domain. So I want to join the domain on this computer now. So what I can do is right-click on the Windows Start button and go up to System. On the System screen, I can click the Change Settings under Computer Name, Domain, and Workstation Settings. It's already set to Windows 8, but it's on a workgroup, so I want to change that. And I want to change it from a workgroup to a domain. I want to type in gopa.com for the domain. It should ask me for the username and password of administrator and our special password. If all goes well, I should be welcome to the GOPA domain. I go ahead and click OK, and it wants me to restart. And I'll click Restart Now. I don't have any users to log in yet, but if I go to Domain Controller 1 and I go to Server Manager, let me log back in, Control-Alt-Insert, password, Server Manager. I should be able to go to Tools, Users and Computers, and underneath GOPA I should have Computers, and I have IIS and Win81 are two computers that are joined the domain so far. So now I want to add another client computer. This is going to be a Windows 7 client computer. So I'm going to VMware Workstation, File, New VMware, New Workstation, New Virtual Machine. Use the custom options. Click Next. Compatible with VMware Workstation 12 hardware. I'll install the operating system later. It is going to be Windows, but it's going to be Windows 7 64-bit. I go ahead and click Next. The name of this virtual machine is going to be called Win7-1. I'm going to put it with the rest of my final exam files in the final exam folder by making a new folder called Win7-1. It'll be BIOS, one processor, 2 gigs of RAM, network address translation network adapter, SCSI controller, SCSI hard drive, create a new virtual disk, 60 gigs in size, and click Next and Finish. When I do that, it creates the hardware. Now I need to install the operating system. I click on CD DVD. I choose an ISO image to install in that CD DVD, and I browse for it. It's going to be Windows 7 Enterprise Evaluation, and I click Open and then OK. When I power on the machine, it'll boot. For the Windows language and time, I leave the defaults and click Next. I click Install Now for Windows 7. I read the license agreement. I accept the license terms and I click Next. I'm going to choose the custom option. That's going to allow me to install the operating system from scratch. I choose my 60 gig hard drive and I click next, and I'm going to let Windows do its install. After Windows is done installing, it's going to reboot. It's going to bring up this screen, and it's going to type in the username. And let's use student again for the username. The computer name will not be Student PC though. It's going to be Win7-1 for our first Windows 7 client. I go ahead and click next. It's going to ask for a password. We're going to use our special password and even give you that as a hint. Special password. Go ahead and click next. It asks me if how I'm going to install Windows updates. Ask me later. I don't want to install anything at this point. I do want to change the time zone. So this is something that I don't have to do configure later on. It prompts me to do this right up front, is changing the time zone. So I go ahead and click next. We'll consider this a work network. So I click work network, and then it finalizes your settings. So I've already set the computer name and I've set the time zone. I still have to do the IP address and VMware tools, and then I have to join the domain. So I'm going to do VMware tools first, just to make it look nice. So I'm going to, you can do it in any order though. Workstation, VM, install VMware tools. I click install. Windows 7 gives you a different dialog box when it pops up, and it does stay up. You don't have to worry about missing it like you do on Windows 8. And it comes up for the autoplay and says run setup 64. Go ahead and click that. Yes, I do want to allow it. I click next to install. I keep typical and I choose next, and I click install again. Go ahead and click finish. Wants to restart. I'm going to say no. I'm going to restart later on after I join the domain. So I go ahead and click no. I do want to do some IP configuration changes, just the DNS, not the IP itself. I can close that. That's done. I want to right click on the network connection. I can do open network and sharing center. I choose the local area network connection, and then I click on properties. And then I click again on properties. I click on TCP/IP version 4. I go ahead and click on properties of TCP/IP version 4. I keep the IP address done automatically. It's just I change the DNS to a static DNS, which is numlock on 192.168.118.21. That is your DC1 IP address. I go ahead and click OK. And I go ahead and click close, and then close. So I have a computer name. I have VMware tools, DNS, and time zone. I do want to remove the CD from this drive. So I go to this VM and then settings. And I'm going to click on CD DVD. Click on use a physical disk instead of using an ISO image, so it's not pointing to that file anymore. And then disconnect it, the device status, and go ahead and click OK. The next thing I want to do is join the domain. To join the domain, I can click on the start button and then right click on my computer. I right click on computer and choose properties. And then I go to change settings under computer name, domain, and workgroup settings. It already is named computer Win7-1, which is fine. I'll leave it that way. I just want to change the domain from workgroup to domain. I'm typing in gopa.com. It's going to ask me what the credentials are for the account that allows this. And it's administrator with our special password. And I should be welcome to the gopa.com domain. After I'm done, it wants me to restart. I click OK, close, and I restart now. And then that'll take in effect all the VMware tools restart as well. Once it restarts, it brings me back to the login screen. I can go back to my domain controller 1, refresh the screen, log back in, and then refresh the screen. It took me all the way out. Active users and computers, domain, computers. I should have these 3 computers in my domain, in addition to my 2 domain controllers, DC1 and DC2. Okay, the next step is to install RSAT, Remote Server Administration Tool, in Windows 8.1, and then administer the 3 servers. So we're going to switch over to our Windows 8.1 client, and we're going to log on. Right now it's logging on to student. We don't want to log in as student. We're going to want to log in as administrator if we're going to do any administration type stuff. So I'm going to click the back button for switch user, switch to other user. I would like to just type in an administrator, but I can't. Administrator is that special one that you need to include the domain with it. So you have to include Gopa administrator and then signing in with password. It's going to create a new local profile, so this could take a few seconds or minutes. You're going to get this interface, you're going to get this dialog box about VMware tools modified. Just go ahead and click OK. It'll just does a quick log out, do a Control Alt Insert, and log in again. Either way, you could cancel or accept. We're going to be in quite a bit as administrator, though. Okay, the next thing we want to do is actually install that service pack to enable RSAT. So we're going to do the same thing as we did before, where that's interesting. You can't even see it. What I'm going to do, I'm sorry. Other files that we copied before class, there's an RSAT file. I'm going to drag and drop it onto the desktop. It's pretty small. And then once it's on the desktop, I'm going to double click on it to install it or to run it. So I'm going to double click on it to install it. And I think I am. There we go. Do you want to install the following update? Yes, I do. I accept. After reading, I accept the license and let it do its install. This is not a typical install. You're not going to have icons. It's not going to do the regular Windows install process. This is being installed like an update. It's going to take a while to install. When it's done, you can just click the close button. You still have to find the server administration tool. To do that, you can click on the start button. That'll bring you over to the Windows tiles. If you just start typing in server, you should come up with Server Manager. After you do that, just for convenience, you can right click on it and you can click Pin to Taskbar. After doing that, you can switch back to the desktop and you should see the Server Manager icon in the lower corner. You can click on Server Manager. It'll launch just like in the Windows Server on the domain controller, except underneath all servers it will be empty. You'll need to add these servers by right-clicking on all servers. Click on Add Servers. You should be able to click Find Now under the DNS or Active Directory. Choose the servers you want to manage, and I just want to manage the 3 servers that are actual servers. I can manage the other devices as well, but only the 3 servers, and I'm going to click the arrow to the right to choose them. I should be able to connect to all of them because they're all running and they're all online. That's a good thing. Now, the next part of this is to install IIS role on the IIS server. To do that, I'm going to right-click on IIS and then add a role or feature. I'm going to click Next, and then it's going to be role-based on the IIS server. When I click Next again, it's going to ask me which features I want to install, and I'm going to choose Web Server IIS down here. After I choose Next, it's going to ask if I want additional features. I do not. I click Next again. Just click Next on things to note. These are the things that it's going to install. I go and click Next. Restart the server if need be, and then I can click Install. This is installing the IIS role, so you're making a web server on that Hyper-V virtual machine on your DC1 server from your Windows 8 client,
Is it mentioned somewhere? Oh,
of which are all virtual.
saw the IS role nice.
When you're done, it's going to say installation succeeded on issgopa.com. Go ahead and close that, and you're done with that part. Moving on, we want to move on to the organizational units then. I do want to be working with tools. You can do this. You can do this from your Windows 8 or switch back over to Domain Controller 1. For this part, I'm going to just do it from here since I'm here already and Windows 8. I'm going to Tools, Users and Computers. And underneath GOPA, I'm going to start creating some organizational units. So I'm going to create organizational units for my top 6 levels of my organization chart of GOPA. So I'm going to right click on here. I'm going to choose New Organizational Unit. And I'm going to choose Executive. Executive. I'm going to create another organizational unit. I'm going to click on the little icon this time. And I'm going to choose one for sales. Also under GOPA, I'm going to create one for operations, or I'll just call it ops. I'll create another one for accounting, or ACCT, and that's the wrong place. So it's a good time to practice of how to delete things. Under View, I want to, nope, that's not it. Hang on. Yes, under View, I want to see Advanced Features. I want to click on Accounting, which is underneath Sales. I thought I put it under, or was it Ops? Where did I put it? Under Ops, there we go. And then I can go to Properties. I go to Properties, go to Object, Unprotected from Accidental Deletion, click OK. Then I can move it right back to the root where it belongs. If I do that, I probably want to put that protection back on. And then I can turn off the advanced view features. So I have accounting. I also have IS. So new organizational unit called IS. And another new organizational unit called HR. Underneath sales, I'm going to create an East and West division. So I'm going to right click on sales and create a new organizational unit called East. And then underneath sales, I'm going to make another one. New organizational unit called West. Underneath operations, I'm going to create the 3 shifts. So I'm going to make a new organizational unit, one for first shift and one for second shift. And then one for third shift. Originally on the final listed that you should split up the accounting group into accounts payable and accounts receivable. I've since removed that. You can also create another Arthur Andersen container at the root of GOPA, and that's up to you if you use it later on or not. But it does ask me to put it there. Now I can start creating users. Create all the users in the GOPA except Arthur Andersen, and you determine the username and passwords. I'm going to use my standard password, and for usernames, I'm going to use their first name. So, just starting right at the top underneath executive, I'm going to create 3 users, 2 users. One is Madison. I'm now going to put a last name on there. The login is going to be Madison, and then I click next, and the password. And what I'm going to do is open up Notepad. And I'm going to type in password. And I'm going to copy it. And I'll use it for pasting later on. I am going to, for the sake of this exercise, uncheck the user must change the password. I do not want them to change the password. And I don't care if they expire because we're not going to expire by the end of the exam. So I'm going to click next and then finish. I'm going to create another user on here, new user. And this one is going to be Robert. I click next. I can do a Control V, and uncheck the checkbox and click next and finish. So it takes care of executive. I want to move over to sales. And in the sales container itself, I want to create Joshua. And that will be his login. If I can type it. Password. Uncheck, change the next login, and that's the only person in sales. The rest are going to go underneath each of the divisions. So under East, I'm going to have Matthew, Jacob, and Emily. So Matthew, Jacob, and Emily. I'm going to move over to the West division of sales, and I have Ashley, Michael, and Hannah. So I'm going to add Ashley. And Michael. and Hannah. Moving on to operations. The only person up on top of operations should be Sarah. Underneath first shift, well, actually from left to right, it gets its third shift, is Christopher. Kayla. John. And Morgan. Moving over to the middle column, the first shift. First shift is going to be Nicholas. And Abigail. Brianna. And Ethan. And over on second shift. Second shift is Joseph. And David. Olivia and Benjamin. Moving to accounting. We're going to put everybody together on our accounting. So we're going to have Andrew. And Daniel. Taylor. Elizabeth. Jessica. Moving to IS. We only have 3 people in IS. It's Samantha, Lauren, and Brandon. Lauren. And Brandon. HR leaves us with Alexis, Anthony, and Emma. And that should be all of our users. Extra credit, if you can bulk add all the people from Arthur Andersen. We did not cover that in class, but if you want extra credit, you can look it up and see if you can bulk add them. That does not mean type quickly. That means using some kind of batch file or script or some kind of external procedure. So the next thing we're going to do is create groups, 6 groups, one for each of the 6 top level departments. So I like using the org chart just to keep me on track. So I'm going to go back to the executive and I'm going to create a top level group, one for each of the top level departments for the users. So I'm going to create a new group. That's a little people thing. And I'm going to call it executive underscore users. And it says put all the people in the appropriate department groups. They want all the people in the group, so I'm going to add them out at the same time. So I'm going to select these 2 people, checked Robert, and then control click Madison, or actually you could do shift click, right click, add to group, start typing executive, and put them in executive users. They're all added. The next group I'm going to work with is sales. Now they want it for the top level, so I'm going to do a sales user group. So I can do new group. I'm going to do sales underscore users. And I'm going to take Joshua. I'm going to add Joshua to the sales users groups. And I'm going to go into the East division. Choose Emily, shift click, choose Matthew. That chooses everybody. Right click, add to a group. Choose sales. And then, let's see where I'm at. I'm in East. So I'm going to go to West and make sure I get all of them done as well. Next group I'm working with is operations. So I go to Ops, make a new group. Ops underscore users. Sarah is an ops user, so I'm going to add her to the group. I'm going to go to first shift, choose all the people, add to a group, look for ops. Go to second shift, choose all the people, add to group. And third shift, choose all the people, add to group. Next group is going to be accounting. So I'm going to make a new group called account underscore users. Everybody's in one container, makes it really easy. Select them all, choose add to group, account, and I have a couple of them. So account users, and I've added them all to the account users group. Next one is IS. Make a new group. Choose all the people. Make sure you don't choose the group itself. And add to the group. And I'm going to choose IS. And the last one is going to be HR. A new group called HR underscore users. And I choose all the people and add them to the HR group. It also says create a group for each department manager, and then the president is considered a department manager. So going through each department again. So starting at the top, I go to executive. I can make a new group. And this time it's going to be called president. This would be like a manager for this group. And I'm going to put Madison in that group. Again, I like using the org chart itself instead of going alphabetically down here. So I'm going to go to sales next. So I'm going to make a sales manager group. And I'm going to add Joshua to that group. Next one will be operations. So I'm going to create the operations manager. I'm going to add Sarah to that group. Then I move over to accounting. And I'm going to add Andrew to that group. And going over to IS. Add Lauren. No, Samantha. Wrong person. Add Samantha to that group. And the next one is human resources. And that would be Alexis. So put all the managers in appropriate department manager groups, and then create a company managers group that includes all the department managers groups themselves. Never know exactly sure where to put this. I'm going to put it right under GOPA this time. I'm going to make a new group right underneath GOPA, and I'm going to call it Corp Managers, just so I know it's different than the other managers. And I'm going to add all the managers groups underneath here. Since they're all spread out, I could go to each one and say add to the group. I'm going to do it backwards though from what I've been doing so far. I'm going to go into the group, and then I'm going to choose the members and add the members. So if I do, I'll just start at the top. President. I'll add president. I'll add sales manager. Sales manager. I will add the ops manager. Oops. Ops manager. I'm going to add the accounting manager. I'm going to add the IS manager. I'm going to add the HR manager. I should have 6 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that looks good. So now I have a corporate-wide manager group that includes all of the managers. So the next part involves the file system. So the first thing we need to do is install a second drive on our server. So I need to switch. I cannot do this from Windows 8.1. I need to do this from the domain controller itself. So I'm going to switch over to the domain controller. And I'm going to edit the domain controller. So I'm going to I'm going to go to the workstation menu, drop down, go to VM, and then settings. I'm going to click the add button at the bottom, and I'm going to add a hard drive. And I click next, and it recommends a SCSI. I'm going to keep it a SCSI. And I'm going to create a new virtual disk. And I keep it as a single file. It recommends a 60 gig. That's going to be fine for just creating the files and folders we're going to be working with. Go ahead and click Next. The default name, go ahead and click Finish. And then I click OK. What that's done is mounted a drive onto the server. I now need to configure it within the server. Okay, so to configure this drive, I want to right click on the start icon after I log back in. Right click on the start icon, and I want to go to disk management. When I go to disk management, I should see that a new disk, I'm going to maximize this window, I should see that there's one unknown disk. I'm going to right click on it and I want to put it online. Then I want to right click on it again and I want to initialize the disk. And these defaults are fine, so I'll go ahead and click OK. And then in this blank area, I want to right click and choose a new simple volume. Go ahead and click Next. Make it the full size. Next. I'm going to send the letter F to it because I know I'm going to have to rotate the drive letters around later on. And then I click Next again. The NTFS file system is required in order to have the security that we're working with. Default allocation size. The volume name is going to be called Data. And go ahead and click Next and then Finish. It's going to format the drive and then give you the drive to work with. I do want to move these drive letters around. Right now this is my F drive, this is my D drive. I want this to be D and this to be E. I'm going to right click on my CD-ROM drive, change the drive letter to E. So I click Change, drop down to the letter E, click OK, and yes, I know that I'm changing the drive letter. I should probably refresh the screen because it's still showing D. Sometimes it won't let me choose this. There we go. Now on the F drive for data, I want to right click on there, change the drive letter path, click the change button, and then from the drop down I want to make this my D drive and then click OK. Yes, I know that things might not work properly because the path letters changed, nothing's on it, so I'm going to click Yes. So now I have a D drive and an E drive. I'm done with disk management. Now what it's asking me to do is within File Manager, is on the D drive, make a folder for each of the 6 departments. So I'm going to open up the drive folder and I'm just going to make new folders. So I'm going to make a new folder, and again, just using the org chart as a template, I'm going to use Executive. I'm going to make one for Sales. I'm going to make one for, oops, that's not new, new folder. One for Ops, one for Accounting, one for IS, one for and one for HR. I should have 6 folders for 6 departments. A manager's folder should be within each of the departments for that department manager. So under each of these, I'm going to go to Executive. I'm going to make a new folder called Manager. So that was, let's see. I'm not sure why I made it Manager under Executive. I should rename that, and I should call it President. So that's under Executive. Then I want to go under Sales and make a new folder called Manager. Then underneath Operations, I make a new folder called Manager. Then underneath Accounting, I make a new folder called Manager. And under IS, I make a folder called Manager. And under HR, I make a new folder called Manager. In addition to that, it wants me to make a shared folder. So make a new folder called Shared. And under the Shared folder, I want to create a Managers folder and a Policies folder. So underneath Shared, I'll make a new one called Policies. And another one called Managers. I'm going to rename it just slightly. Is this Corp Managers, just to keep it a little bit straighter for me. And I want to secure the whole thing of making sure all this stuff works appropriately. So, so I want to start with the accounting department, for the accounting folder I should say, and go to properties, and I go to security, and I want to, let me back way up, one more step back here. I need to, before I do anything, is at the data volume, at the data level, I want to work with the security and the data area. So go to properties and then security. Okay, sorry. I see users group here, and that's going to give them read list folders and write, not write, but it gives them the ability to do all that kind of stuff for all the users. I want to get rid of this. Leave the everyone, but get rid of the users, otherwise everybody can see everything. So I click the edit button, and I get rid of users by clicking users, and then click remove, and then click OK, and then OK. So I've taken away the rights from everybody, and now I'm going to give the rights that I want to give. So I go to accounting. Let me just start at the top again. Sorry, I need to keep consistent. So executive, I go to properties for the executive folder and click on security. And I want to edit this list, and I want to add the executive users to this list. And the executive users should be able to modify and write and read, but as soon as I click modify, the write is automatically added. So I can go ahead and click OK. Moving over is the sales folder. I can right click on the sales folder, go to properties, security, edit this list, add the sales users to the list, click modify, which will also give them write in addition to the read they already had, and then click OK and OK. Moving over to operations, I can right click on operations, go to properties, and then security. I want to add the operation users and give them the modified and write rights. And then I go to the accounting folder and go to properties and security and edit and add the accounting users and add modify and write rights. Then I have information systems, so go IS, properties, security, edit, add IS users, add the modify right, click OK, and then I have HR, properties, security, edit, add HR users, and give them modify and write rights. I also have a shared folder. I want to add that last, so I go to shared, properties, security, edit. I want to add the users, all the users, back into that, so all the users can read and write everything in the shared folder. And I click apply and then OK. I don't have to click apply, just click OK and then OK. So that's the main level. Now I need to go back and secure each of the department managers folders. So starting at the top again of my org chart is the executive department. I have a president folder that I want to secure that only the president should have access to. So I'm going to go to the president folder, right click on it, go to properties, and then go to security, and then go to advanced. The thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to disable inheritance. I don't want the rights to flow on down. I'm going to click disable inheritance, and I'm going to convert everything to explicit permissions. So I go ahead and click that, and now these are no longer inherited but explicit. Now I can do my adding and removing and controlling from here. I'm not going to though. I like the other screen better. You can do it from here if that's where you like though. Go ahead and click OK. And now I'm going to edit this list. So I'm going to click on edit, and I'm going to take away the executive users. I don't want the executive users to be able to read and write or anything to the president folder, so I'm going to remove that, but I'm going to add the group called president to it, and then give them that role or that group write and read and modify. And I'm going to do the same thing for the rest of the folders. So I'm going to the sales folder, go to sales manager folder, and I'm going to properties, security, and then I'm going to go to the advanced because that's where you have to disable the inheritance. Then I convert it all to explicit, click OK, edit the access control list up on top, remove the sales users, and add the sales manager.
Why did we add all the users if we're going to remove them right away again?
And then I'm going to give them modify and then OK. And then I'm going to click OK. So that's on sales. I go to operations. I go to the operations manager, go to properties, security, advanced, disable the inheritance, convert them all to explicit, click OK. I want to edit the access control list. I'm going to remove the users from this manager folder, and I'm going to add the manager to the manager folder. And give that person modify and write rights. Operations, then comes accounting. Oh, not the accounting folder, the accounting manager folder. Go to properties, security, advanced, disable the inheritance, convert them all, click OK, edit the access control list, remove the accounting users, and add the accounting managers. And add modify, which also gives them right. Click OK, click OK. Then I go to information systems, IS, go to manager, properties, security, go to the advanced to disable inheritance from there so that it doesn't flow down anymore. After it doesn't flow down, then I can control this list and I will remove the users from the manager folder. And I want to add the IS managers to the manager folder. And give them modify and write rights. And my last folder for departments is the HR manager. I go to properties, security, advanced, disable the inheritance, convert them, click OK. Then I edit the access control list to remove the users, HR users, and add back the HR managers. And make sure you choose modify, and that gives them write rights. I still have a shared folder to work with. Everybody has access to the shared folder. I have two folders underneath there, though, that everybody should not have complete access to. The first one is the corp managers. So I'm going to go to properties for the corp managers, go to security, and I'm going to disable the inheritance, and then convert it. Now I'm going to edit this. And in this case, I'm going to remove the users and I'm going to add the corp managers into it. And so they can have write access to it. And click OK and OK. The policies folder is a little bit different. If I go to security and then I want to block I keep saying block, sorry, disable the inheritance and then convert it to explicit permissions and then click OK. When I edit it this time, I want to change the user rights. I don't want to remove them. All I want to do is get rid of modify and get rid of write. I still want them to be able to read the files and see they exist. So I'm changing the rights. I'm still going to be adding HR users though. So any HR user is able to modify that information. So then I click modify and that gives them the ability to write as well. Ensure that users will not be able to see folders they do not have access to. I do that. I can't do that through here. I have to do that through file and storage services over in Server Manager. And when I click on that, I have these options over on the left-hand side. And I want to click on shares. And I can go ahead and create a share now. backup. I'm going to create a share the other way. I think it's easier. So I'm going to go back to my shared folder, go back to this PC, and I'm going to create the share over here. I don't like using the wizard necessarily. So I'm going to right click on my data, and I'm going to go to Properties, Sharing, and I'm going to use Advanced Sharing on the bottom. When I choose Advanced Sharing, I have the checkbox to say share this data, this folder. The share name is going to be data. Now I also need to give permissions to the share. And if I click on the permissions button, it brings me up the access control list. It gives them the ability to read, but that means that only anybody will be able to read the files and never be able to write. To be able to change that, we're just going to give them full control and let NTFS takes care of the security. After I've created the share, I can click OK, and then close. You can create the share over here. That's perfectly fine. I'm just going to edit the share instead of creating it over here. Wherever you create it's perfectly fine. I'm going to refresh the screen so that the share should show up. There it is. Once I see my data share, I can click on it, right-click, Properties, and I want to go to Settings. And the very first setting is Enable Access Based Enumeration. That means it displays only the files and folders that a user has permission to access. If a person does not have at least read rights, the Windows hides the folder from the user's view. And that's what I do. So I check that and then click Apply and then OK. So that should take care of the file system, and I want to make sure that's going to work. So I'm going to log in some different people to try it out. I'm going to use my Windows 7 client, which went to sleep. So I'm going to power it back on because it has faster, it creates desktop profiles more quickly. I'm going to do a Control-Alt-Insert to log on. It's still logging as a local user student. I'm going to switch users, and I'm going to log in as, where's my org chart? I'm going to log in as Samantha. Samantha is the IT manager. I'm going to click cancel. I'll log off later. And I'm going to go to, click on network. The very first time I go into this, it's computer specific, not user specific. It's going to ask me to turn on network discovery, which means that none of my discovery is going to work very quickly until I log off and log back on. It does want credentials to allow you to turn that feature on, and I just did. So it's going to take a while before that's going to show up. So I can just do a / DC1 / data to be able to get to my share just as quickly. I only see two folders. One is shared and one is IS. If I click on shared, I am a manager, so I'm able to see corp managers and policies. If I go into policies, I shouldn't be able to create anything. If I do go into corp managers, I should though. I should be able to create files. Underneath data, I also have an IS folder. Obviously, I should be able to create things right in the IS folder, but also because I'm a manager, I should also be able to access the IS folder. Let me log out and log back in as somebody else that's from IS, who's not the manager, and we're going to choose Brandon. So Control-Alt-Insert, switch user, and we're going to log in as Brandon. Under network, I should be able to see the domain controller now because it refreshed. So I can double click on DC1, go to data, and I can see IS and shared just like I could as Samantha. If I go under IS, I don't see the manager folder, so that's a good thing. I should be able to create new folders under IS, which I can. Under something else is going to sleep. I'm not sure where this is coming from. Okay, if I go under shared, as Brandon, I can get into the shared. I can't see the corp managers though. I can see policies, but I shouldn't be able to create anything in policies, which I can't. But in the shared folder, I can just create new folders. So that's good. We're going to log in as Anthony next, who is a regular HR person. So we're going to log off Brandon and log on as Anthony. Switch user, other user, Anthony. I click on the File Explorer, I go to Network, go to DC1. Data, I see HR and shared. I click under HR. I don't see the manager folder, which is good. I can create a folder under HR, which is good. Under shared, I can see the new folder. I can make a new folder. I do not see the corp managers folder, but I do see the policies folder. And being part of the HR group, being an HR person, I'm able to update the policies in the shared folder. So that does work. I would certainly try many more departments and users. I'm not going to right now, but that's how you'd be testing these accounts. The next thing we need to work with is group policies. And we need to set up and test account lockout in the entire GOPA domain so the user's account is locked after 3 invalid attempts. Since we've been working with this for a while, I'm going to use just the regular old default domain policy instead of making an additional one. However you want to make, if you make an additional one, that's fine. So I'm going to go to Tools, Group Policy Management, and under Domains, under GOPA, we have the default domain policy. And if you're feeling good about this, go ahead and edit that or create your own and link it to it. It does not tell you of how you have to do this. So I'm going to use the default domain policy. I'm going to right click on it and go to edit. So the first one is to set up account lockout on the entire GOPA. So you're locked out after 3 tries. So how I'm going to do that is go under computer configuration. And then I'm going to policies, Windows settings, security settings, account policies, and then in our account policies, I have the account lockout policy. The account lockout policy is currently not defined. If I choose any of these, well, actually, let me go to account lockout threshold. So how many times can you log in incorrectly? And I'm going to change this to 3. And when I apply that, it wants me to also change the other 2. It comes up with a default of 30 minutes for each. That's perfectly fine. The exam doesn't tell you what you should set it to, just as long as it happens. To go ahead and test that to see if that works, we're going to go to our Windows 7 client, and we're going to log out. And we're going to log back in as Anthony. I probably should have done a GP update first. This might take a while for it to update, so I'm going to log in correctly. Go with command prompt. I don't think I need to run as administrator. I don't think so. I think I can just run as command prompt. GP update /force. Might encourage the group policy to be updated a little bit more quickly. And it does apply to the computer. So, okay, now let's log off. Control-Alt-Insert. Took a long time to tell me that. Not sure what's taking so long. What is not working? Okay. Let's switch back here. What is wrong? Okay, this is my group domain policy, account threshold, 3 invalid attempts, 30 and 30. Certainly looks right. Let's just switch back to the client. It's going to run as administrator anyway. No, you shouldn't have to do this. GP update / force. So it looks like it applies. Control-Alt-Insert. Worked last time. I'm not sure why it didn't work before. It worked that time. The reference account is currently locked, and may not be logged on to. And actually, they could wait 30 minutes and they could log in, but it doesn't tell them at all. So, as the administrator, then you'd come back under DC1. You would use Server Manager. And go to Tools, Users and Computers. Find Anthony, who is in HR. Doesn't tell you anything about the account here, but if you double-clicked on Anthony and went to the account is currently locked out of Active Directory, so you can just check the box, say unlock, or you can I can reset the password and then unlock at the same time. So I guess if you just want to reset it, you have to go to Anthony, account, and then unlock the account. Apply. Okay. And then Anthony should be able to log back in. And he can. The next thing is to set the default policy to include remembering only 15 passwords and force the password to be changed every 10 days instead of every, 40 days by default. Clicking back my DC, my domain controller 1. I already have one of these, group policy management open. Oh, here's actually a group policy editor for this. And this is going to be found under Computer Configuration, Policies, Windows Settings, Security Settings, Account Passwords, and then Password Policy. So it's right next to the other one. And currently the maximum password age is 42 days, and we're going to change that to 10 days. So I'm going to click on this and change it to 10 days. And then click OK. And passwords to remember, it's going to remember 24 by default, and we want to change it to 15. The next thing, we just want several security options set. And most of these are going to be found under computer configuration, policies, Windows settings, security settings, local policies down here, and most of them are found under security options. So we click under security options. The first part is going to be under interactive logins. So if I go to interactive logins, I'm going to find display user information when locked is currently not defined. I want to disable that. So I click on it and I define it. And I want to do not display the user information. So I do not want to display the user information. The next one is do not display the last person who logged in. That's not defined either. So again, I do not want to display, so I want to enable the do not display. So I don't want to know that Madison logged in last or Brennan logged in last. I just want the login screen. The next one is going to be do not show, require the Control Delete. That way I don't have to hit Control Alt Insert in our case or Control Alt Delete every time. So I want to define it and then enable the do not require. Clicking OK. Prompt user to change passwords. It's always good for them to know before it expires. So I'm going to define this and begin prompting. Just use the default. I didn't tell you what to choose. 14 days is fine. It'll say start thinking about changing your password. The next two items are going to be under the network security section. So I go to network security and we want to prompt the user to change the I'm sorry, nope, that's not it. Force the log off. So when the logon hours expire, right now it's disabled. So you could, as long as you're logged on, you could stay on forever. We're going to change this one. We're going to enable it. So when that time, login time ends at 5 p.m., we're going to disconnect you. So enable that one. The next setting we need to do is set up and test drive map policies for the drive letter F to be mapped to the share. That's going to be found under user configuration. So we're going to user configuration, and then I go to preferences, and then I go to Windows. I can open this here, Windows settings, and then drive mappings. So I go to drive maps, and there's none in there currently. So I want to right click and make a new one, a mapped drive. Update is the default. I personally like replace. It does not tell you what you have to choose. You can choose anything you want. The location is going to be, I should browse for it actually. And I'm going to find a, you know what, I'm not going to browse for it because it's going to take, it's too messy. Stop that. I'm just going to type it in. / DC1 / data. The label I'm going to have for this is going to be data. So this F drive, which I'm going to choose right here, use, no, I'm sorry, not use the first of all, use F. F is going to be labeled as data, and it's going to point to the data volume. I don't have to log in as a different username and password. I'm going to leave everything else the same. I'm going to click apply and click OK. The little red triangle does not mean it's bad. It's just the symbol for replacing. And that is all the group policies that I see as of now. We're going to get into one more when we configure the printer. So I'm going to go back to my Windows client, try a couple things. I'm going to go to my group policy GP update. Certainly all these things should apply. Do you want to log off? Yes, I do want to log off because some of those policies only apply when I log on. I don't have Control Delete. I do not have the last person I logged on, so far so good. I'm going to log back in as Anthony. That's who I believe I logged on as last time. If I click under Windows Explorer, under my computer, under network, I should have a data drive, an F data drive. I do. I double click on it. I see HR and shared. Everything is really, really good right now. So I'm not going to be able to really see at this point when my password expires or whatever. Well, actually it does. Your password will expire in 9 days. I said that it's going to expire in 10 days. So that part's working as well. And it reminds me. So that's a good thing. Actually, I think I missed a part.
Oh, the users?
I did.
Yeah, I thought you were just going to get back to that. Yeah.
I just thought of that now. I did skip a part of the users, so I should go back and take care of that before I get into printers. So under my domain controller, group policy management editor, I can close that. I'm really not going to use the management anymore. Active Directories users, I'm going to users and computers. A couple of account restrictions that I want to work with. Andrew can only log on from the Windows 8.1 computer. So Andrew is in accounting. So I want to go to your accounting, find Andrew. If I double click on Andrew, it brings up his properties. And most of these configuration limitation things are going to be found under the account tab. So I click under account. And in this case, it says I can log on from Windows 8-1. So that'd be the log on to button. I click on log on to. I can only log on to the following computers. And it's going to be called Win 8-1. And I click add. And I click OK. So now he can only log on to that computer. John can only log on from the Windows 7-1. John is in third shift operations. So I'm going to go to Operations, Third Shift, find John, and go to the account. And he can only log on to the following computers, Win 7-1. And I click Add, and then I click OK. I'm going to bring my Windows 8 out of sleep mode to actually try him in a few minutes. So I'll let it do its thing. The next thing is going to be Hannah can only log on from 3 a.m. to 7 a.m. daily. Interesting schedule. Hannah is Western Sales Division. Western Sales. So go ahead and click OK there. I'm going to Sales West, and there's Hannah. Let's fix her right away. Hannah. Hannah. Boy, I did it all across, didn't I? Hannah. I did her username right. That's a good thing. Hannah can log in only from 3 a.m. to 7 a.m. So under account, I have login hours. Daily, 3 a.m. to 7 a.m. daily. So 3 would be right there. So I'm going to deny logon from there. And 7 would be there. So that should be what her login hours should look like. Realizing because under the default domain group policy, she will get logged out at 7 as well. And then I click OK. The next one is Anthony's account is disabled. Anthony is the HR in the HR department. I just can right click on Anthony and disable the account. I can do it right from there. That's a nice easy one. Otherwise, if you go to Anthony and go to the account, you can scroll down and check the checkbox account is disabled. Often that's missed. If people go to accounting, everything looks fine. Disabled is off the list. So, or right click. You can also see it's disabled because a little down arrow. The next one is Jessica's account will expire December 31st, 2015. Jessica is in accounting. So I go to accounting, find Jessica, double click, go to accounting, and I'm going to have her account expire at the end of, I can click the little calendar, December 31st, 2015, and then click OK. So that should take care of those user accounts. If you want to log in as a couple people, you could certainly try that. Let me try Hannah. It's not 3 a.m. to 7 a.m., so things shouldn't allow her to log on. So I'm going to log off. I'm going to log on as Hannah. The account time restrictions prevent you from logging on. Let me try logging in as Andrew. The account configured to prevent you from using this computer. Please use another computer.
It doesn't tell you.
What's that?
It's great. It doesn't tell you which one.
It doesn't tell you which one. If I go over to Windows 8 and I try logging in, I want to switch users and I want to log in as John. Your account is configured to prevent you from using this PC. Please try another one. But I should be able to log in as other people. So those kinds of account settings seem to be working.
I think those keys on the bottom is how many times you...
I apologize, that part was out of order. You probably would like to do that when you're creating the users instead of waiting until the end. Okay, the last section then is in fact installing a printer. So we're going to install the entire printing system. So I can close Active Directory users and computers. I'm not going to use that right now. I am going to go to my dashboard. I'm going to add a role and feature. For my role and feature, I'm just going to click Next. And then, yes, it's going to be a role-based or feature-based installation. And I'm going to install it on DC1. I'm going to install on DC1. I'm going to go ahead and click Next on DC1. And what service do I want to add? I'm going to add the print and document service. It needs the additional features added as well, so I click Add Features. I do not want to add any other roles. I do not want to add any additional features, so I go ahead and click Next. A couple things to note, go and click Next. I'm only going to install the print server. I'm not going to work with those other services in this section. So I'm just going to install the print server. I go and click Next. Restart the server if needed. I'm pretty sure the print services does not. It's a pretty small install, but just get in the habit of changing it so you don't miss it. And let it do its install. Installation succeeded on DC1, so I can click Close. At this point, underneath Tools, I can now go to my Print Management object. This object was not there before. This shows me what print servers I have here, so I click underneath Print Servers. I have one print server on my domain. If I install the print services role on other ones, they would show up underneath here as well. I can see that I do not have any printers or ports or anything configured underneath here right now. So underneath printers, I'm going to configure the classroom printer. Remember, when I configure the classroom printer, this is a pointer to that printer. This is not configuring that device. To do that, I can right click on the printer and say Add Printer. I want to add a TCP printer by the IP address or host name, which is the default. Go ahead and just click Next. Type in the IP address. It's listed in the documentation for your exam. It is 172.16.192.117. Auto detect the print driver to use, which is fine. Go ahead and click Next. And it figures out that it's an HP 4100 series. It does not tell you what to set the printer up as for a name. So you can choose anything you want. I would suggest something like HP L119 HP 4100, and then I create the share name with the same thing. I do want to share the printer. That's what's going to make it available to the clients. That's kind of why you are creating the printer, is to share to the clients. And then go ahead and click Next, and then Next again. I am going to test print a test page. That is normal practice. With one person doing it, you can do that easily. It's when you have multiple people doing it at the exact same time that you can have a problem of knowing who's actually printing. I will wait for it to print. And it printed successfully. The next part of this configuration is to not only be able to install it on the client, but to be able to install it automatically. So to install it automatically, I can right-click on the printer, and I can choose the option to deploy with a group policy. By deploying with a group policy, I click on that. I'm going to browse to choose which group policy I'm going to use, and I'm going to use the default domain policy. So it's going to apply to everybody in the whole company, all computers, all the users. Again, if this was a departmental printer, you would create a new group policy for that department and have it apply to that department only. We don't have that in our case. So I'm going to click OK. I'm going to check both the check boxes for users and computers just to make sure. And then you do have to click the Add button to make sure it shows up underneath here. If you don't click the Add and just click OK, nothing happens. So go ahead and click OK. And the printer deployment or removal operation was successful, or they succeeded in doing it. To see if you're successful, I'm going to switch over to my Windows 7 client, and I'm going to log in as somebody who can actually log in. Let's do Kayla. And if this is successful, I should have a printer for Kayla to print to. Since it's going to take a while to log in, I'm also going to log on my Windows 8 computer as somebody else. Let's say Emily. And let her create a whole profile over there. Okay. This is Kayla. Consider changing your password. It's going to expire in 9 days. That's a good sign. Because everybody's password is going to expire in 10 days, and you've been prompted to warn. And now if I go to Notepad and I type Kayla, I should be able to print to my HP 4100 printer. Switching over to Windows 8.1, consider changing your password, so that's a good sign as well. I am also going to run Notepad. And I forgot who I was. Emily. Emily, and I go to print, and I can print to my L119 HP 4100 printer. And all is well.